Hi, I'm Cheryl Phillips from Health Ed Talks, here to share this program, Athletes and Substance Use for Coaches, with you. I hope our time together is definitely worthy and that you can take some of these components with you back to your team. So putting this program together, I started off by researching what is optimal athletic performance and came up with 10 components of it. The first component is that mental toughness and focus. Being able to avoid distractions, to really be in the moment, to remember everything that's going on, that's a big piece. Secondary to that is cardiovascular fitness. Making sure the heart and lungs are working together and working hard, and we expand their capacity so that they can get the oxygen down to the muscles that need it and they can pull the lactic acid out. That's a big part of fitness. And lastly, there are the skeletal muscular components. Everything from flexibility, speed, power, coordination, balance, agility, endurance, strength, and you can probably think of a few others. But these are kind of the 10 basic components of optimal athletic fitness. This is what we strive for when we're at practice with our athletes, and it's what they try to improve upon. And when they get to the best that they can be, that's when they have their best performance in competition. So how do we get there? How do we help our athletes accomplish these things? There are 4 habits we can encourage our athletes to engage in that are going to support their optimal athletic performance. First one is training. And this is kind of an expectation for us as coaches. We expect our athletes to show up to practice. We expect them to give 110%. And we expect them to do the drills and activities we ask them to do. That's a big part of our training. Along with that, I really encourage you to add a mental health piece to your training whenever possible. Mindfulness techniques, visualization techniques, all those have been proven to improve athletic performance. So doing some of that, helping athletes to be able to focus, to be able to block out distractions, to be able to see the big picture, be able to make split-second decisions, to build their confidence, to build their commitment, to help them goal set. All that is part of the training, the mental health piece of that training. So working on that as well as the physical component. When speaking of the physical component, again, making sure that we are doing that cardiovascular health. That's why we make them do those burpees and jumping jacks and running to increase the capacity that they have so they can endure an entire performance or competition. Second to training, we have nutrition. And I know you have told your athletes about eating properly and the importance of eating properly, of getting those macronutrients, the protein, the carbohydrates, the fats, and the right amounts from the right sources, and the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals that need to constantly be replenished. It is so important that athletes are properly fueling their body so that they can train, and stressing to them that you cannot out-train a bad diet. You cannot out-train bad eating. You can't show up early and stay late and think that by doing so, you're going to compensate for the donuts and cookies that you were eating at lunchtime. Doesn't work. If your body does not have the fuel it needs, it can't do the training that is required. So you can't out-train bad eating. You must fuel your body properly. In addition to that, we have the sleep and recovery. So extremely important. The National Strength and Conditioning Association stresses that teenagers need 7 to 10 hours of sleep to increase their athletic performance. Their body does need that rest. And encouraging your athletes to turn off their screens at least 30 minutes before going to bed, and making sure they're off or out of the room so they're not hearing ding, 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 ding all night, which is definitely going to interrupt their sleep. They need a solid 7 to 10 hours of sleep at night. And recovery. We do not use the same muscle groups or exercise hard the same muscle groups every single day. And there's a reason for that, because by doing so, we tear them down, we increase the risk of injury, we decrease the accuracy, and we make them weak. So we want to make sure that we are giving recovery days to certain muscle groups so they can regenerate and rebuild and become stronger. And lastly, the 4th habit we want to get into is making sure we're hydrating properly. 2% of body mass loss due to water causes dehydration. Dehydration can lead to muscle cramps, spasms, increased fatigue, reduced concentration, reduced focus. So hydration is a key component of keeping our body healthy and doing our optimal athletic performance. So these are the 4 habits: training, nutrition, eating properly, getting sleep and recovery, and hydration. These 4 things are going to give us what we need, the tools we need to increase those 10 components of optimal athletic performance. All these things together help us be the best athlete we can be. What doesn't help us be the best athlete we can be is alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. These things negatively impact our ability to work on the habits, which negatively impacts our ability to increase all the other components that we need to do well. So let's take some time to talk about those. First thing I'm going to talk about is the brain in general. This, I think, is the one takeaway that you can really stress with your athletes. So simplified version of this, your brain develops from the back to the front. Back part of your brain fully matures first. This part of your brain is responsible for balance and coordination activities. It fully matured when your teenager was a toddler stage. They learn to crawl, they learn to walk, they learn to run. We use it every day, and your teenager's brain is focused on this part at practice when they're training. This is our muscle memory part. How do I swing? How do I jump? How do I leap? How do I move? Muscle memory is kept in this part of the brain. The middle part of our brain, this is the limbic system. This part of our brain is responsible for our moods: happiness, sadness, joy, frustration, love, hope, hate, anger, anxiety, depression. All that is in the limbic system. This part of the brain is maturing during these preteen and teenage years. At the same time, a teenager has hormones flying around their body. So between the hormones and this part of the brain maturing, that's why we have so many of those big mood swings as teenagers. That's why it's hard sometimes for them to keep control when they're out on the court or out on the field, because this part of the brain is really moving and functioning a lot. The last part of the brain to completely mature is the front. This is the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain responsible for all the thinking while they're out on the field. Logic, language, discernment, decision-making, reasoning, rationalization, all of that is in the prefrontal cortex. That happens to be the last section of the brain to completely mature and develop. And unfortunately, it's not completely mature till someone's about 25 years old. So we're talking to an athlete over and over and over, and they just don't seem to get it. Part of it is because this part of their brain isn't mature and they really don't get it, or it takes multiple times for them to get it. So what's happening is all day, every day, we have these neurons in the brain that are constantly making connections with other neurons in the brain. Where 2 neurons meet, that space between them is called the synapse space. For a connection to be made, chemicals pass from one nerve ending over that space to the other nerve ending. When that happens, that's that light bulb, that aha moment. They get it. They're able to do it. They got the finesse. They realize it. They caught on to the play. They get it. That's perfect. When that's trying to happen, though, and it's interrupted with another chemical, a drug of some sort, obviously it's going to have a negative impact on the connection. Either the connection is not made at all, it's made faulty, or it's made with an addiction or affinity to that drug. So instead of at 25 years old having this big, beautiful, functioning brain, people who engage in substance use during their preteen and teenage years has a negative impact and can have a lifelong negative impact. In terms of our teenagers and athletic performance, when they're using it and they're under the influence, it's going to have an impact on their ability to perform. So the substance can affect the prefrontal cortex. So now they're not so into the game. They're not focused. They're not able to block out distractions. They're not remembering the play or what they should do next, or the decision making is off. If it's affecting the back part of their brain, then their muscle memory is lost. They don't remember the finesse that they need to swing the bat or the racket or to jump or to pull or whatever athletic endeavor they are doing. They've lost that muscle memory. It just doesn't work. It's not clicking like it's supposed to. And lastly, it can affect the limbic system. And again, that's when those moods really fly off, where they're not able to keep their emotions under control during the game. They get hot-headed, or they get frustrated, or they get angry, or just really upset. So substance use during athletic performance can affect any section of the brain, which is obviously going to have a real negative impact. In addition, substances don't just wear off instantly. So while some teenagers feel that they can go out on Friday night and use substances and come back on Monday and go to practice and be just fine, that's not always the case. Depending on the substance and how much they've used, it can have a long-lasting impact. Partying on Friday night can have a negative impact on practice Monday night. It sure can. It can stay in the brain and affect performance for days. So let's talk about some specific substances. We talk about APEDs, appearance and performance enhancing drugs, over-the-counter prescriptions and opioids. It's a whole group kind of mushed together. Nicotine, marijuana, and alcohol. So APEDs, appearance and performance enhancing drugs. We are talking anabolic steroids, human growth hormone, ergo and thermogenetics, beta blockers, diuretics. There's a whole gamut of substances in this area designed to help somebody's athletic performance. Truly, it doesn't help a whole lot, and the negative outweighs the positive every single time. Luckily, we're only looking at about 3% of athletes in high school that engage in this, but again, stressing the importance of not using these substances. These substances, in terms of looking for paraphernalia, if you're concerned your athlete might be using it, any sort of pill or syringe could be a red flag. But in talking to our athletes, the negatives of engaging in APEDs is irritability. It affects that limbic system and causes severe mood swings and out of control emotions. It's going to affect the kidney system, so we're going for dehydration here. It can increase blood pressure. Long term, it can affect the kidneys where we go to kidney failure or have reproductive issues. So it negatively impacts our ability to train, our ability to focus, our cardiovascular health, our sleep and recovery time, as well as our hydration, all which is going to impact our performance. Second substance, over-the-counter prescription and opioids. So we're talking over-the-counter, we're really talking about cold medications, things with DXM, dextromethorphan, or Coricidin in them. These give people kind of a hallucinogenic out-of-body experience. So it's not uncommon for people who are addicted to these substances to go in and take several packets of Coricidin or drink down a whole bottle of cold medicine so they can get that hallucinogenic out-of-body experience. When we are talking about prescription drugs, we are talking about stimulants like ADD medication, so Adderall, Ritalin. We are talking depressants like Valium. We are talking narcotic pain relievers like Vicodin and Oxycontin. In terms of pain relievers, typically a teenager gets hooked on those due to an athletic injury. So they get hurt during their sport and they end up having surgery or something else going on, and they're given a narcotic pain reliever to help deal with that. Really encourage you to encourage athletes and their parents to be their own best medical advocate. And when there are injuries that are severe and they do need a narcotic, having the smallest dose, getting it off as quickly as possible. We build up a tolerance to these things very, very quickly, and addiction can happen very, very quickly. So having as little as possible for a shorter period of time is so important. We also know that those narcotic pain relievers had led up to our opioid crisis in America because you get the same type of high from heroin that you do from an opioid narcotic. But all of these medications can have a negative impact on somebody's athletic performance. Depending on if it's a depressant or a stimulant, it can give somebody anxiety, it can cause dizziness, headaches, panic attacks, increased heart rate, insomnia, digestive issues, appetite issues, which again are going to affect all the habits we need our athletes to have to be successful. So anytime we are taking medication that we do not need, is not prescribed for us, we don't have a reason to take, it's going to have a negative impact. That takes us to nicotine. So nicotine, some of the paraphernalia to look out for there. If somebody is smoking, we're talking, cigars or cigarettes, lighters, matches, that kind of thing. Also, if they have a nicotine addiction, but they know they can't smoke or vape anywhere else, if they're chewing on toothpicks, that can be a red flag because there's many nicotine-infused toothpicks. And then there's nicotine-infused drops as well. So if they're chewing on some sort of candy or toothpick, that could be a red flag. And of course, vaping is still extremely prevalent among our teenagers out there. We have the Juul, which is kind of faded away. It was a disposable cartridge that went into a battery pack and you kept throwing away the cartridge and getting a new one. The Soren, which is that pink rectangle thing on the screen there, that is a refillable vape. So the bottom piece is the battery source, the top piece is the tank, and they put new vape juice in it. Not as prevalent anymore because we have these disposable ones. The Puff Bar up there is also still popular, although it's kind of faded away too. And replacing it is kind of this thing called the Breeze, which is, there's a Breeze Pro and a Breeze Regular. These are disposable flavored vapes. They're pretty small, pretty compact. The longer Breeze almost looks like a marker if somebody's holding it in their hand. So just being aware of what is out there so that you can see the red flag as a coach if you see your athletes with one of these. In addition, there are wire packets out there. That's for somebody who has gone beyond the disposable vape and into a mod type where they can recoil the inside of it. So if they have packets of wire or cotton, that's a red flag. And then the paraphernalia that's out there. The fake vapes. So there's watches that are actually vapes, key fobs that can actually be vapes, vaporware, the sweatshirt that's on the screen there. That's always related to a vape. In this particular case, the string going through the hood of the hoodie is actually a hose. So one end attaches to the vape, which they can stick down the little pocket in front. The other end they can put on their mouth and vape off of. And it looks like they're just chewing on the string of their hoodie. So a lot of things to be aware of when it comes to vaping and the paraphernalia out there. In terms of our concerns physically for athletes, vaping contains 4 primary ingredients. The vape juice itself has propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, the flavoring agents, and then the nicotine. So when those things are combined and heated up and converted then from a liquid to a vapor, there's also chemical transaction that takes place. So coming on the top of the vape apparatus in that vapor, we have nicotine. We have volatile organic compounds, VOCs, things like toluene, which is in paint thinner, benzene, which is in car exhaust, formaldehyde, which we preserve dead bodies with and is a cancer-causing agent, acrolein, which is a highly regulated herbicide. A lot of chemicals people are choosing to inhale when they're choosing to vape. In addition, they're also inhaling heavy metals. Based on how the vape apparatus is put together, there's that little piece of metal coil in there, and every time it's heated up, microparticles of it flake off. So people are inhaling lead and nickel and zinc into the respiratory system. And then the flavoring agents, which we're learning more about, some of them can actually be toxic to the human body. So this is a handful of the chemicals we know people are choosing to inhale when they're choosing to vape, and obviously it can have a negative impact on their athletic performance. And we also now know that teenagers that vape are 3 times more likely to then start smoking. So they predispose themselves to smoking by choosing to vape. And we know the dangers of smoking. We know it's a stimulant. We know it's highly addictive. And 90% of adults today that smoke began before the age of 18. 90% of adults today that smoke began before the age of 18. So that nicotine gets into the brain, gets into that synapse connection, and addiction is real, and it's really, really hard to quit. And we know the dangers. There's over 7,000 chemicals in every puff of a cigarette. 70 of them are known carcinogens, known cancer-causing agents. We have people dying every single day due to cigarette smoking. Heart disease, lung cancer, emphysema, top 3 diseases causing death every day. And so obviously, vaping and smoking nicotine use is going to negatively impact an athletic performance. It can cause anxiety and dizziness because it is a stimulant, headaches, increase the heart rate. It slows injury healing, and this is because nicotine is a vasoconstrictor, meaning it constricts blood vessels, so less blood is flowing to body parts that are injured, slowing how fast they heal. Insomnia is a big issue, the decreased appetite, again, dehydration, respiratory issues. All of these are going to impact the habits that we need and are going to impact our athletic performance. Next, marijuana. So marijuana is a plant that has in it over 100 cannabinoid compounds. The 2 most studied cannabinoid compounds are CBD and THC. So CBD is the cannabinoid compound that can have a medicinal effect on the body without the euphoric high. Lots more research needs to be done on that so we know how it impacts it and how much somebody needs to have a positive experience. But it can help with epilepsy, pain, PTSD, anxiety. But when it comes to teenagers, we know they're not usually using marijuana for the CBD, they're using it for the THC cannabinoid. The THC cannabinoid is the mind or mood altering cannabinoid that gives the euphoric or high effect from the product. Now, typically speaking, a plant of marijuana has somewhere between 5 and 30% THC in it. So when it's dried up and rolled into a paper like a joint and smoked, they're getting somewhere between 5 and 30%. However, there's also now what we call THC extracts. And this is when the THC cannabinoid is pulled or extracted out of the plant. There's many means to do that. Depending on how it's done, there's a lot of products on the market. Things called wax and dab and shatter and crumble and oil. Many different THC extract products out there. These things are extremely, extremely potent. So if you look at the THC oil there, that is a cartridge of oil that you'd screw onto a battery and use like a vape. Reading the directions on that thing, it says that if somebody takes an inhale of 3 seconds, 1 3-second inhale off that vape, they can be high for 1 to 4 hours. That's how potent it is. 1 3-second inhale, high for 1 to 4 hours. And teenagers don't realize how much THC they're getting or how much THC they can actually accept before it has a negative impact on their body. But any THC is going to have a negative impact on their performance. So looking at paraphernalia to be aware of, if they're using the plant itself and smoking it, so a rolled up joint, different types of pipes that are out there, including hidden pipes like the lipstick case, looks like a regular lipstick, but is actually a pipe to smoke the plant of marijuana. Other items that are related to it, the silver thing up there, that's called a grinder, where they put the dry plant in it and they will twist it back and forth. It grinds the plant down into very fine so that they can put it into their pipe to smoke it. The Visine, when someone's using marijuana, often their eyes will become bloodshot. And so they use the Visine to get the red out of their eyes. The toilet paper holder with the white sheet around it, that is a dryer sheet. And that's called a spoof or a spaloof. So if somebody's using marijuana or vaping or smoking, they can exhale into the tube, and that dryer sheet then absorbs the smell and the smoke. So it's hard to know that somebody's actually using. In addition, if somebody is using one of the extracts like wax or dab or shatter, in order to use that, you need a pipe called a rig, looks something like this, homemade and regular. The end of it, which is called the nail, they heat up really, 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 really hot with the butane lighter and then put a little dab of the product on there and it dissipates right away and they can inhale to get the high. When you hear that the phrase, a little dab will do you, they really mean it. A very small amount of wax or shatter can, again, make somebody high for several hours. Then, of course, there are the THC vape pens that are out there, disposable, as well as the cartridges that attach to a battery. And then food products. More and more food products are being infused by THC. So just being aware. There's so many things out there. And just as a coach, to be aware of what your athlete might be exposed to, talking to them about it, and looking for these red flags. In terms of affecting performance, so marijuana is a depressant, so it's going to slow down the reaction time of the athlete. It's going to impair their balance and coordination. It can cause anxiety. It can impair their learning and being able to see and make split-second decisions. It can increase their heart rate, cause dehydration, nauseousness, respiratory infections, chronic fatigue, and even psychosis. And psychosis is a case where somebody has had so much THC intake in a short period of time, it overwhelms their central nervous system. So while you will hear that somebody cannot overdose on THC and die, that is true because it does not hit the receptors in the brain that control the cardiovascular system. However, somebody can overdose on THC and end up in the hospital and even in the psych ward. And that THC overwhelms the brain and that person, their brain shuts down. It can take hours to days to even weeks. Sometimes they get out of the psych ward and they are put on antipsychotic medication for a very long time to help the brain cope with whatever happened while they're under the influence of THC. So again, just being aware, talking to our athletes about it, because using THC does nothing for athletic performance. It can inhibit their training, their mental game, their focus, their cardiovascular health, their hydration, their nutrition, their sleep recovery, all can be negatively impacted through THC. The last substance I'm going to talk about is alcohol. So just a reminder, a drink is a drink is a drink. So whether it be a glass of wine, a glass of beer, or a shot of hard liquor, they all contain the same amount of alcohol. There are exceptions to the rule, but in general, they all contain the same amount of alcohol. So 3 shots, 3 glasses of wine, 3 beers, going to get just as intoxicated from one to the other. I also pulled some stats up here for those athletes that are considering going on to college athletics. Things to keep in mind that alcohol use can definitely have a negative impact on college life in general. We find that 29% of college dropouts, alcohol is involved. 38% of academic failures, alcohol involved. 64% of violent behaviors on campus, alcohol involved. So just reminding our athletes about making wise choices, not using alcohol till they're of age, and definitely never getting into a car with somebody who has been drinking. Things to look out for our young people. One, a gummy candy. Our teenagers know that they can soak gummy bears or other gummy candy in alcohol. Typically it's vodka, and the candy will absorb that alcohol, and they can go around eating candy, getting little shots of alcohol. Any sort of container, obviously, any sort of games like beer pong games, those are red flags. And the other thing many people don't think about is the cover-up sense. So if an athlete comes in and they smell really strongly of cologne or perfume or bug spray or mouthwash or minty gum, Sometimes that is a method of hiding that they are under the influence because they're trying to cover up whatever it is that they have been using. So lots of minty gum or mouthwash, lots of cologne or bug spray can definitely be a red flag. So alcohol is a depressant. So it slows down the central nervous system. It's going to definitely impact athletic performance. It's going to reduce speed and coordination, reduce endurance, inhibit nutrient absorption, reduce aerobic capacity, increase blood pressure, insomnia, and cause dehydration, which again affects every habit that an athlete needs to be successful. Other things I want to share with you real quickly are hiding spots. So maybe you don't see the paraphernalia right out in the open. There are many ways to hide substance use, from cups, commuter cups, where they can pull apart and the bottom's hollowed out. Water bottles can even be hollowed out, where things can be hidden behind the label when the bottle's put together. Pop cans can be hollowed out. Shoes are a great hiding place. Books are a great hiding place. And everyday objects, hairbrushes, lipstick or cosmetic containers, deodorants. There's so many ways for people to hide substance use, kind of just being extra aware of what is out there. So again, optimal athletic performance in general has 10 components to it: mental toughness and focus, cardiovascular fitness, flexibility, speed, power, coordination, balance, agility, endurance, and strength. All these together, where we work hard and we're successful, help us improve our athletic performance. To help make that successful, making sure that we're getting training, that we're really focusing on our mental game. Our cardiovascular health is worked on. We get sleep and recovery, we hydrate, and we eat properly. This is how we become the best athlete possible. And alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs are going to negatively impact for that for sure. So when you talk to your athletes, they may talk about why some of them do choose to use. And what we hear over and over again is that there's a lot of stress. And there is a lot of stress on our teenagers and even on our teenage athletes. We think that being an athlete, connecting with a team is a protective factor, and it truly is. Anytime somebody feels that they belong and welcome for who they are, that is a protective factor. But at the same time, our student athletes often have more stress on them than just regular students do. There's more expectations of them, and they have less time to fulfill those expectations because they're at practice quite a bit. So just talking to your teenagers about what they can do to help deal with the stress and anxiety that every high schooler or every teenager has. You know, talking to someone, whether it's you as the coach, a school counselor, a parent, a social worker, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, talking is the #1 thing we can do to help relieve the negative parts of growing up. Mindfulness, meditation, yoga, again, if you can include that in practice, that is a huge benefit. But talking to our teenage athletes about that, you know, taking time out for themselves, doing mindfulness activities can have a great benefit. Like eating properly, getting the proper nutrition, sleeping, recovering, as I mentioned before, and then any hobby, whether it's journaling, writing, listening to music, reading, whatever hobby that they can find as their stress reliever is really important to have. And because stress relievers help us our whole life long, not just after we get through high school or through our teenage years. But as you know, adults have stress too. So finding ways to cope with that stress is immensely beneficial and immensely beneficial for your athlete right now. So thank you. Thank you for taking the time to watch this program. I hope it was beneficial, that you learned a few things to help you as a coach and help your athletes succeed and be the optimal athlete that they can be. Have a great day.